New York politicians have a grand plan to build thousands of new units and make housing more affordable for renters, but it will be a nightmare for landlords. I'm Tony, and this is Real Estate Investing and Landlord News. So I have an interesting article for you today, and they're going over this grand housing plan that they're building up in New York State for New York City. Okay, so they've got all these new rules and regulations that they're hoping to pass all in one big package. And simply put, it sounds like a jumbled mess. Okay, the only people who are going to be able to work through this are extremely connected and wealthy developers who, just happen to be able to, go through the long process of getting something new and very expensive built. I don't think that this is actually going to help promote affordable housing within the city. I mean, honestly, looking at this, right, it just seems like there's too much. It's too much. It's too complicated. There's too many different little hoops you got to jump through. And when those kind of things are in place, what you see is very, very large, very, very wealthy developers are the only ones who are really going to be building anything. And they're going to be building luxury housing. They're not going to be building affordable housing for the lower income people. No, because that wouldn't benefit them. So yeah, I mean, this plan is not going to make much of a difference. I'm not going to say it's not going to make any difference, but part of it is very, very bad for landlords. And I'm going to go over that in just a moment as I go through this entire article. So before I get into the article, go ahead, hit the like, subscribe button, maybe leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think. So my personal opinion is that by, the solution that most of these places come up with in order to make housing more affordable is to pass more laws. And my personal opinion is that the real solution is to reduce the number of laws you have, not pass new laws, but to cut laws that you already have out, destroy them, eliminate them, delete them, okay? Make it so there's less laws, less hoops to jump through. When you pass new laws, you have all of the previous laws that are already on the books. Then you have these new laws that are supposed to come up with exceptions or exemptions or make it a little bit easier. But because there's so many different laws in place, you need a legal team, you need, lots of patience, you need to know the whole process. And that really is discouraging development, especially when we're talking about small development, okay? And in the past, small developers would be the people you would think would be built, like, hey, I'm going to build a duplex. How many people are out there building duplexes in New York City right now? I imagine not too many. Okay, there's not too many brand new duplexes being built, even in the outer boroughs. No, because it's just not worth jumping through all these hoops for a little small project like that. So that's why you have these humongous projects and these humongous developers being the only ones who are able to do anything. And by not having that small, entry level new housing development, well, guess what? That is making it so that there is less likelihood that there's going to be affordable housing within the city. So anyway, I'm going to get into this article. We can go over the details of what they are planning for New York City. So this article is coming from the New York Post, and it says, Albany's grand plan to revamp housing in New York City unveiled. See it here. And let's go over the details. The ink is now dry on Albany's grand plan to massively ramp up housing supply in the Big Apple, with lawmakers and Governor Hochul expected to sign off on the landmark proposal sometime this week. The multifaceted plan includes a litany of measures to push developers to build thousands of new housing units while attempting to reduce rental costs and protect millions of tenants from unscrupulous landlords. They say, oh, we have to protect millions of tenants. Listen. There aren't millions of bad landlords, so how, you weren't protecting anybody from anything. Anyway, let me continue. I'm going to go off on a rant because of the way this is worded. The sweeping measure includes good cause eviction tenant protections for New York City. It lets tenants take their landlord to court if they raise the rent more than 10% or 5% plus inflation, whichever is lower. Tenants can still be evicted for gross negligence, failure to pay rent, refusing to let a landlord make repairs, and failure to pay rent. Landlords are not required to renew a lease. So that's a very important key part of this law that they're passing, right? Good cause eviction protections. So basically, if you notice there, they said you can take your landlord to court because they're going to consider it like an eviction if the landlord tries to raise the rent on a tenant more than 10%. So just as an example, I know rents in New York can be much higher than this. $1,000 a month. If you raise the rent more than $100 a month, then you are going to have to go to housing court to prove that it is necessary. Otherwise, you can't do it. So this is kind of a backdoor rent control, okay? This is a way to discourage landlords from raising the rent over a certain amount. Government price control, ridiculous, because we all know that the eviction courts in New York are backed up. The housing courts are backed up. So by the time you get that tenant to court, it could be months or years later. Who knows, So yeah, this is absolutely ridiculous. It'll be just basically telling landlords, okay, the max you can raise the rent is this 10%. There are significant carve-outs in the bill for situations where the good cost tenant protections will not apply, including when a tenant vacates an apartment, newly constructed buildings, and those built since 2009 are exempt for 30 years. Units with rents at or above 245% the fair market, a measure put out by the Federal Department of Housing and Urban Development. Fair market value is currently around $6,000 for a one-bedroom apartment, meaning most luxury apartments won't apply. Units owned by a landlord with a portfolio of 10 or fewer units, co-ops, seasonal dwellings, and retirement communities. So notice they had a ton of carve-outs in there, okay? So they say, oh, well, if you have less than 10 units, you're a small mom and pop landlord, so therefore you don't have to fall under this good cause eviction thing, right? And so they said units owned by a landlord with a portfolio. So my guess is that means that if you have multiple buildings and the number of units you have is less than 10, then you don't fall under good cause. So what would be a good way around that? Maybe to have multiple LLCs, different companies that you own, and each one only has 10 units. If you're a small landlord such as myself, right, that owns more than 10 units. Now, that's not going to work for the big landlords, but at the same time, whatever you can do to get out of being stuck under this good cause eviction thing and being stuck under this, de facto rent control, then it would be worth taking the time to do it, in my opinion. Co-ops, seasonal dwellings, and retirement communities aren't going to apply. This isn't going to apply to. Luxury apartments, this isn't going to apply to, and new buildings. So, it kind of sucks if you are a small mom and pop landlord who owns a building more than 30 years old and has more than 10 units. Kind of sucks, okay? And I know a lot of people will be like, oh, well, nobody who's a small mom and pop landlord, would own a building. Like, yeah, there's plenty of people. Yeah, these are multi-million-dollar properties, right? But I know that there are people out there, and they manage their own properties, and they will be up there doing the repairs themselves, etc. And they're stuck under this ridiculous eviction law because, simply put, they think that all landlords are super wealthy, and that's just not the case, okay? And so there's going to be a lot of good landlords who get stuck under this garbage, and I feel bad for you. I'm not surprised. I was calling this years ago when the first time I read about the good cause eviction thing. And, it didn't make it through the legislature up in New York. I was like, this is going to pass eventually. This will pass eventually, and it looks like it's about to pass right now. Okay? Towns, villages, and cities outside the 5 boroughs may opt into the good cause guidelines that apply to the city. Now, notice that they put that into the bill, right? Because this is a statewide thing. But at first, at least, this is only going to apply to New York City. So as time passes, more and more places across the state are going to sign up for this as well. And I wouldn't be surprised if eventually the entire state, even, like upstate New York, where a lot of the laws are different, if they don't end up following this same nonsense. Now, they also put into this housing deal something about squatters, right? They say, squatters. The plan would clarify the difference between tenants and squatters and emphasize that squatters do not share the same rights as tenants, clearing up a legal gray area that has allowed evictions to drag out in court. Now, that's interesting, but I don't know if it's enough. At least not enough in New York State for landlords and property owners to actually be able to remove these people. Okay, that's what I want to see. Now, they can clarify the difference. Oh, squatters are not tenants. But at the same time, if the police themselves do not remove these people and you still have to go to eviction court, then what does the clarification mean? It didn't do anything for you. So we'll have to see. We'll have to wait and see, after the law is passed, if this actually does help resolve some of these issues. Affordable housing tax incentives for developers. The deal implements a new version of the existing 421A property tax exemption for developments that include a certain percentage of affordable units. The new incentive, dubbed the Affordable Neighborhoods for New Yorkers, or ANNY, includes requirements on how many units in a given building must be priced at affordable levels and where those rents must be set. Most smaller developments with less than 100 apartments must keep a fifth of those units at an affordable price. That's set using a HUD measure of what someone making 80% area median income would be able to afford, roughly $2,100 a month for a one-bedroom in 2023. Developments of 100 or more units must hold 25% of apartments at the same price point. So yeah, every time I read about these, where they have a certain number of affordable units that must be developed, developments like that, simply put, that is very discouraging to developers, okay? A lot of developers, simply put, will not deal with that at all. Instead, will say, hey, we're not going to even build in the city because it is too difficult, it is too hard to make money, and even if we put every other unit inside the building as a luxury apartment, we'll not be making enough money to make this deal worth it. So, that alone... I wish that rather than trying to pass more laws like this, they would just let people build. That's it. That's what I personally believe. I'm like, hey, stop trying to stop people from building. Okay? Stop putting all these rules like, oh, if you want to build, we want to build 1,000 units, right? And they're like, well, 80 or 25% of them have to be affordable. Well, then we don't want to build any units in your city, That's what a lot of developers will say. They'll say something like that. They're like, we'll go over here to Houston. They'll let us build as many units as we want. We don't have to ask or build in a certain number of affordable units in Houston, and, we'll make just as much money. So, my personal belief is that by putting all these laws and rules and regulations in place over developers, right? They're discouraging developers from wanting to build the new units that they say that they need. So let me see here. There was something else in this new deal. Yeah. The plan also sets minimum wage standards for unionized construction workers in such developments. Yeah, all this, you put union crap into the development, makes it even more expensive. Like when you build construction around here in Omaha, Nebraska, you can do it much cheaper because there aren't any requirements for unions to build it. There aren't any requirements for a certain number of affordable units. There aren't all these hoops you got to jump through, and the planning and approval process is so much faster, and it's not fast. Okay, there are certainly improvements that you can make, but man, it is not even comparable. It is not even comparable in terms of speed, and I realize we're so much smaller than New York here, and there's so many less factors that you have to deal with. But when you talk about, hey, we really have this need for lots of housing to be built, and then you do everything in your power to make it as difficult as possible to build anything, well, then you have no right to complain. You have no right to complain that there's no affordable housing available and that the process takes so long. So yeah, interesting article. I'm not going to go over the whole thing, but I'll put a link to the article in the description down below, and you can read about everything that's going to be in this housing proposal.